Hello and welcome to the Pool Genius NFL Survivor Week 5 guide for the 2025 season. My name is Steven Andress, joined each and every week by the lead analyst at Pool Genius, Jason Lisk. Thank you for all the support of this video each week. About 10,000 views a week so far. We had 500 likes on this video last week. Let's beat that this week. If you find this helpful, hit the like button. I almost said smash. Everybody likes to say smash the button. You can smash the like button too if you want. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell for notifications. That's the challenge this week. Any like we get is appreciated, but let's try and beat that 500 likes from a week ago. In this week's episode, we're going to walk you through, as we do each and every week, our favorite picks for NFL Survivor pools in Week 5. We'll do a breakdown of who we think the most popular teams are as we record here on Tuesday afternoon. And we'll look at maybe some contrarian plays to consider. Again, there's some more big favorites this week, but first of all, let's welcome in Jason. Jason, how are you, my friend? And yet more chalk, sir.
Yeah, it was you say more chalk, but it was a really good week for our advice. That's not always going to be the case. We're going to have teams that we suggest that don't work out, but certainly last week the team we were most off of was the Chargers, so that worked out.
Yep.
We did not give the Chargers out to any. I would have to check. It was under 0.1% of our subscribers in really special pools. I'm not even sure we had that many on the Chargers. It was a low number. They were probably of the popular teams that were drawing interest, the one we were lowest on. Didn't really have much on Green Bay unless you were in a really large portfolio. Our most common were Houston, Denver, who, rolled on Monday night, and then New England, and then some Buffalo, but lower than the public. So
yeah.
Also being off Detroit was a safe future value, which we'll hit them in this week. But Houston and New England were big wins for those large pools where you're saving future value.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because, if you're still in a pool, you're always going to want fewer people to be left in the pool. Like Circa has 66% of the pool left still. I'm in some massive nationwide pools that somehow have lost 70% of their entries. I think that's more just people forgetting to put in picks there. It's not the reality of what the situation has been in NFL Survivor pools. But, we get a tie last week that knocked a lot of people out if they picked the Packers. To me, I wonder, though, Jason, through 4 weeks, we've had far less chaos than we've seen each of the past 2 years. My question to you is, is the bottom of the league just worse than recent years, where we just may not get as much chaos with these big favorites each and every week? Because I'm looking at some numbers here, and right now, if the season ended today, the Titans would be the worst offense by EPA of any offense in the past 4 years. The Cincinnati Bengals would be bottom 3 of any offense over the past 4 years by EPA. So it just makes me wonder, is it less likely that these pools are going to have a sole survivor, the big ones?
It certainly is trending that way, but all it takes is some wipeouts at some point. And the worse teams look, the more people want to pick against them. And so the more you have concentrated picks against those teams as the season goes on some other options that may be riskier typically, the more entries get through by picking, Buffalo, Detroit, things like that. The more they may have to get to those teams late in the year. So there's still that risk, but I will answer your question on the bottom of the league. It certainly does appear to me that there are no major surprises out of the bottom of the league. Like last year we had the Commanders, right? They were drafting in the top 3 the year before. They got Jaden Daniels. They had a new coach, new quarterback. They were catching some big numbers early. You remember they were one of the big knockouts, I think multiple times early in the year, including when they beat Cincinnati. And Cincinnati was fairly popular. So we had some teams that were surprises. Denver beating Tampa Bay. Denver ended up in the playoffs. I'm not sure any of these teams that have been catching 7 or more are playoff teams this year. I don't think we have many surprises. The biggest surprises are probably teams like the potential surprises might be like a Jacksonville, right? And that's not a huge surprise if they were to win the South, or like Atlanta if they were to rally. That's really, I don't see teams below that as like jumping up like Washington did, like we've had in the past with some other teams. And so, yeah, I think the bottom of the league is more identifiable as the worst right now. And so we are getting cases like what's the meme? The haters said that Brian Callahan couldn't coach. The haters said the Titans would have no. It turns out the haters are right. No, yeah. So we're getting a lot of those type of memes. Like the Titans have been really bad. The Saints have been plucky, but probably aren't very good. Like they had a lot of things go their way, and they were able to actually move the ball in Buffalo. And then you've got situations where some injuries. I mean, the Giants just lost Malik Neighbors. That's an impact. Right? I mean, that took a team that probably had just won, but was probably was one of those plucky underdogs, and now they're a little worse, right? They're a little less likely to pull those upsets. The Jets look like, they're not very good. Cleveland has had its issues, and Cleveland very well could go to a rookie quarterback at any point by midseason.
They just announced it today, actually. It looks like Dylan Gabriel's going to get his first start in London. So,
I missed that news while I was getting everything set up for Survivor.
Congrats. Now you have a day 3 rookie quarterback, day 3 draft pick starting at quarterback. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, there's an example. Like those teams and if they continue to be bad, they're going to make moves like that, right? And so, I think there's definitely a clear tier break in the NFL where we haven't even seen the big surprises from what we thought the bad teams would be.
For sure. I'm right there with you. So I think it's just, I'm very curious where the carnage is going to come from if one of these teams at the bottom are going to pull a crazy upset at some point. But that's the beauty of Survivor. You just never know. So we'll find out. Let's get into it, though. For week number 5, we will begin with the 5 most popular teams as projected by Pool Genius. This data is from recording on Tuesday afternoon of NFL Week 5, so subject to change. Obviously, if you're a Pool Genius subscriber, you can get up to the latest popularity numbers in your Pool Genius account. If you do not have an account, you can hit the link down in the description to get a free 3-day trial if you have not used the trial yet. So the 5 most popular picks for NFL Week 5, we start with number 5, and it is Thursday Night Football. The LA Rams hosting the San Francisco 49ers. The Rams have been bet out from a juiced 3 to a 5.5 point favorite, and popularity right now at just 5%, despite being one of the 5 most popular teams for NFL Survivor pools in week number 5. Obviously, the win probability here for the Rams has gone up with more injury questions for the 49ers. The quarterbacks are banged up. The wide receivers are banged up. A couple of guys on defense are questionable for this game on a short week. So it doesn't surprise me that the Rams have become a bigger favorite. But the fact that we have only 5% popularity on a top 5 popular team this week means we're going to get some big numbers in the rest of the top 5 as we move on to number 4, Jason.
Yeah, number 4 this week. And by the way, that Rams projection, before I get to number 4, that's a projection right now. We've got still picks lingering on things like the Ravens. And so I'm kind of projecting, because we've seen that line move, that they're going to move in and the Ravens are going to drop out. And teams that people had preset, let's say Sunday or last week. But I do think the Rams will finish in that top 5, but they're getting cover from these other teams. Number 4, the Buffalo Bills, one of the most popular last week, also up there 2 weeks ago. So you're getting some limited availability now with the Bills, where I think in a lot of pools, less than half the entries still have them. And we've also seen some line move. Patriots looked pretty good last week. So I think that's going to impact the popularity down a little bit, where it's in the single digits. We've got it at 8% right now on Buffalo as they host New England.
Number 3 most popular team in NFL Survivor pools for week number 5, the Indianapolis Colts, a 6.5 point favorite at home against the Las Vegas Raiders after Geno Smith throws 3 interceptions and a blocked field goal as well in that game to cost the Raiders the win against the Chicago Bears in week 4. Colts projected at 20% popularity in Pool Genius for week number 5. Injuries to look out for in this one: the nickelback for the Colts, Kenny Moore, missed last week. We'll see his status for this week. The Raiders also, bad offensive line for the Raiders. Might have gotten worse for week number 5. Colton Miller, one of their tackles, left the game with an injury. That's another one to keep an eye on. But the Colts right now sitting at 20% popularity, as they are easily the biggest favorite they've been all year. Jason, number 2.
Yeah, number 2, we have the Detroit Lions just above the Colts at 21%. This is a situation where you may see the Colts be higher in certain types of pools, but Detroit in others. We have them very similar. Detroit, the biggest favorite of the week right now. And Detroit also, coming off that big win last week against the Browns, were used in some pools. And so it'll be interesting to see how many people choose to use them again in this spot and versus save them for later, because they do have still a lot of future value. But we project Detroit will be quite popular coming off their last two performances and based on how bad the Bengals have looked without Joe Burrow.
And the number one most popular team in NFL survivor pools for week number 5, as projected by Pool Genius, is the Arizona Cardinals at home, hosting the lowly Tennessee Titans. 7.5-point favorites for Arizona. Pool Genius projects 28% pick popularity for Arizona. It's easy to understand why. The Titans are a complete dumpster fire right now. They tried changing their play caller in week 4. It led to a grand total of 0 points against the Houston Texans. Their coach is 3-18 against the spread, is Brian Callahan. They have injuries mounting as well. Their number one wide receiver, Calvin Ridley, left the game with a quote-unquote undisclosed injury. Maybe parentheses, is not good at football right now. The tackle, J.C. Latham, missed last week again. A lot of other injuries on here to keep an eye on. Even Cam Ward was on the injury report last week despite playing in the game. And now they take on the Arizona Cardinals, who have maybe disappointed slightly, but in the first 2 weeks of the season handled 2 other bad teams quite well in the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. So the number one most popular team for pick 5, the Arizona Cardinals, at 7.5-point favorites and 28% pick popularity. All right, Jason, let's start breaking down these biggest favorites for week number 5. Go ahead and pull up the Pool Genius data grid, season view. We can go to the season view there, just the grid of how big of a favorite these teams are and how often they're going to be this big of a favorite the rest of the season is highlighted in green here. And let's start off at the top with the 3 biggest favorites that are more than a touchdown. That is the Detroit Lions, a 10-point favorite at the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about the Cardinals, 7.5, 8-point favorites against the Tennessee Titans, depending on where you shop, and the Buffalo Bills at 7.5-point favorites against the New England Patriots. So we talked a little bit about the Titans and how bad they are. And frankly, right now, I think they're basically a free square. So until they at least show us they can be competitive. So that's something to think about. In terms of the Lions and the Bills, we talked extensively last week about not using the Bills last week to potentially use them this week. And I got to be honest with you, right now, as we sit here, I think I'm coming off of that a little bit and want to save the Bills for a little bit deeper into the season until I at least know whether their defensive playmakers like Ed Oliver and Matt Milano are actually going to play in this game. And also just for the respect that I have in Drake May as a potential disruptor, high-quality quarterback who's been top 5 in EPA and CPOE composite this year. So I think I'm coming off that previous stance where this was going to be a slam dunk spot to use the Bills with another option like if the Cardinals, if you have them left, or the Lions here as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an example of we react to information as we have it, right?
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, this looked like a great spot for the Bills. Patriots have looked better over the last 2 weeks, so then it looks a slightly worse, but still very, you would still play them in a vacuum, I think. But when you look at how many other weeks they could still be usable, and that they're limited in how many people have them available, it also may be a no need to rush it spot now, right? If you have other options. So that's probably what you're looking at, because I'm just going to say a few spots ahead. That week 10 spot when they play at Miami, that's a week. Maybe Miami's looked a little better, and maybe you're thinking, oh, that's not the best spot on the road, but that's a tough week. And so the reason they're popping that week is because there are no good options, and that's a week you could catch people really concentrate on some bad teams or some risky teams. And having Buffalo could be a high value play as one example. So I think there's probably more of a case to save them now than there was last week, but that's okay. If you saved them and now your decision is I'm going to save them again, what's wrong with that? Right. So I think that's perfectly fine because you will have other spots.
Just to drive that point home, at this point, I look at the Bills, especially with all the Ravens injuries and Lamar being hurt for week number 5. And them not being in the same tier we thought they would be with Buffalo the rest of the year. I kind of look at the Bills as the queen piece, the queen on a chessboard piece right now, where you can kind of move them wherever you want, because they're basically going to be 3-point or larger favorites every game the rest of the season. So I think it's really good to have them in your back pocket if you get into a pickle down the road. And the longer you hold them, the less they'll be available for other teams like you were talking about. So I'm with you on that. So I don't think I'm going to use the Bills this week in any of my pools. So the question becomes, you didn't like using Detroit last week for game theory purposes. You talked about EV and better spots. Is this the week for Detroit for you? Are they going to be really high in your priority when we get to the end of the show here in the top 3?
Yeah. So the short answer is probably yes.
Okay.
And I'll explain why I think the game theory comes up differently this week than last week, because they're still a big favorite, right? So that element's still there. It is on the road, but they're catching a Bengals team that, man, they are struggling. They have failed to reach 200 yards of offense in 3 of their 4 games. The first one with Burrow, the last 2 without him. This offense is struggling, and we know the rest of the team around Burrow and that offense had been subpar even before, right? But let's talk game theory here. Last week, we had a situation where we had a 90% favorite. We had a bunch of 77, 78% favorites. So the relative payoff potential, and so when that 90% favorite is the most popular, you're just a little less likely to benefit from the upset, right? That still doesn't make like advancing not worth it. But this week there is more payoff potential. Like, we don't envision these upsets happening, but we never do, right? But this week at least you have 2 teams that are also over 20%. One is more popular and still a little riskier if you go by market odds, and the other is more risky and it's similar popularity. So you basically are in a situation where if you catch one of those 2 results, it's a great EV week for you if you play the Lions. And the odds, like, think about parlays, the odds of hitting a 2-team favorite parlay actually aren't that great. They're probably like 56%. Like, if these teams are at 80, 70%, it's somewhere, but it's below 60% that they both win, right? And so you're getting a situation where you may have a 40% chance of benefiting from a loss that knocks out at least 20% of the pool. Those are where I want to push in on the team that could keep me off that scenario and give me the higher odds to advance. So anyway, that's where I think this week plays differently, is the other picks are slightly riskier than having the Bills as a top pick on the board last week.
The other thing I love about the Lions too, and this, I'm going down narrative street now, Jason, but it seems very clear to me that Dan Campbell and this coaching staff over multiple years now really don't lay eggs. Like, they are supremely focused, supremely competitive. You heard Ben Johnson getting asked about the Lions just scoring late touchdowns when the game was out of hand a couple of weeks ago, and his response was, the Detroit Lions score touchdowns. That's what they do. This isn't, we're not playing Pop Warner football here. The Lions are going to try and score a touchdown every time they have the ball in their hands. So I just love that focus that we get from the Lions. I mean, do you agree with me on that? It's total narrative. Like, I don't know if you can really quantify it as much as just seeing how much they blow some teams out by, but your thoughts on that?
That's mostly true. I wish it were true in week 2 last year, because I was heavy on the Lions.
Oh no!
When they doubled up the Bucks and couldn't score in the red zone and lost that game, because that was a contrarian play, if you recall, because the public was on the Ravens and the Lions.
But that wasn't so much them laying an egg, right? It was more just red zone bad luck, if I remember
red zone.
correctly.
Yeah, they ran cold in the red zone. They really outgained the Bucks and just lost a close game because they did not execute in the red zone. That can happen to anybody. That said, I mean, I know the odds are like 20%, 80% to win, over 80%.
They're double-digit favorites now, yeah.
But what are the paths to the Bengals winning this game? It has to be holding Detroit down, right?
Well, they don't have an offensive line. They just let Bo Nix, who looked awful, go up and down the field on them. They don't have a defense. So I don't know, like extreme turnover variance, like a +4 turnover game, like we saw.
Special teams plays, yeah, block kicks, all that random stuff, right? And maybe hitting a bomb to Jamar Chase or something they haven't done recently, right? but that's the path. Is they're probably not winning a game where Detroit executes on offense, and so
I do think it's important that we note the injury report. Again, we are recording here on Tuesday, so things could change as the week goes on, and that's the benefit of being a Pool Genius subscriber if you have access to all this information closer to kickoff. But we do need to keep an eye on the secondary for the Lions. They got banged up last week. DJ Reed is doubtful to play. He's definitely not playing. He's a candidate for IR after leaving the game last week. Terrion Arnold looks like he's going to be okay, the other starting corner, but we still need to monitor that. And one of their safeties also got banged up as well. So we'll see about that as well. So this is the wrong set of wide receivers to have banged up secondary against, at least. So if we're going to try and poke holes in this, I guess that's the area. You just need to at least monitor the injuries going into later in the week here with the Detroit Lions. You know, we always ask these big favorites too, Jason, going into the week, which of these big three favorites scare you the most? I guess by default, it's the Cardinals. I mean, this is a team that statistically has been slightly below average on both offense and defense by EPA this year. They've had the benefit of playing an easy schedule, but my God, the Titans just look like a dead team right now. I don't know. My process is I never want to take a favorite who I think is not an above average team in the NFL and is also going to be very popular. So the Cardinals probably won't be on any of my entries, especially, there's only a few that I haven't used them yet, honestly. A lot of us have used them week 1 and 2. But for those of us that have them left, I really don't think I'm interested in using them this week because of those factors, even though I have zero belief in the Titans being able to even be competitive at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about the Titans. Honestly, I'm surprised they haven't fired the head coach. I would be more scared of the Titans this week, by the way, if they had an interim coach.
Yeah,
that would be a scary spot. I still don't believe strongly in Arizona, but I also don't believe this Titans team is well coached at all and has much motivation to play for this coach. And it seems like they're prolonging the inevitable. There's no way this dude turns this around.
Right.
I mean, 3-18 against the spread, that's hard to do because the spread adjusts to how bad you are, and they keep setting the new lows. They've covered one game since he's been there that they didn't win outright. That's impossible. That was the week 1 game against Denver by like half a point, by the way. So I mean, yeah, here I'll present the case. Yes, Arizona scares me. And yes, I think Arizona presents a play against opportunity from a popularity standpoint, which is the case I laid out with why Detroit is somewhat attractive this week. On the other hand, Arizona has no future value after this week. They've caught the early part of their schedule. This is the third one. And this game looks even juicier than it did in week 1 because of how bad Titans have been. This is really the last spot other than maybe some late contrarian spots when they might be like a 3-point favorite late in the year, right? I'm looking at
the grid, man. I'm having a hard time finding another game.
There's no other above. We don't have them above 60% in any spot. They do have a home game against Atlanta. Who knows where those two teams are by then? They do have a home game against Jacksonville. These are like the only spots where I think they'll even be catching points, right? Laying points. And so the argument for them is if you haven't somehow used them on some of your entries and you're in like a multi-pick pool, where really conserving that future value matters. This is the pick that does it. It probably sets you up to complete the run through the season. But it also gives you that opportunity if you've been saving those other teams, if you've used Arizona, now to play against them, right? So that's the opportunity you have if you've done a good job of taking Arizona, Houston, teams like that, Seattle in week 3, that kind of thing. Now you can fire back over the top of the people who now feel they have to take Arizona. So that's kind of the argument both ways.
All right. So we talked about future value as well. The Bills being number 1 in future value, the Lions having some future value, but this clearly being the best spot right now as we look at the grid moving forward here. So I think it's safe to move on here to the second tier of favorites, Jason, for week number 5. And just a reminder, everybody, the reason I do these videos each and every week is because I used Pool Genius last year to win a huge survivor pool with more than 5,000 people in it and a $10,000 prize. So it's a great product. Like this grid right here, I'll say it. I said it last week. I said it the week before. I'll say it again this week. This grid saves so much time as a handicapper. This is worth the price of admission alone, let alone all the other tools that are in here, the customization for your specific pools. Jason, just real quick, I want you to click on the My Pool Picks tab there so we can show them it's not only just recommendations for each and every pool, but if you have multiple pools loaded into Pool Genius, you can hit that big blue button at the top and it'll actually give you recommendations for how to spread out your picks to maximize your chances of, creating expected value, creating unique entries as we get deeper into the season. You can kind of see there what Pool Genius recommends for the spread of how many picks you should put on each team. So highly recommended. Again, if you haven't signed up for the free trial yet, it's down in the description. And Jason, anything else you want to add here on the customization?
Yeah, I mean, just so we're clear, these are some pools I've set up that I'm playing in. So those recommendations are specific to my pools, which are a lot of multi-pick large pools.
A lot of different
where
rules.
I've used Arizona. Yeah, I've used, like you talked about. So I've used Arizona, a lot of those. So it's also based on what teams I've used and what the entries have available. And so it is customized to me. You may get a different concentration if you're, say, have 5 entries in pools where there's only 100 people left or less in all of them. You might get a different set of recommendations based on the factors that bubble up as to why a certain pick is more or less valuable. So, yeah.
All right, let's go back to the season view there, or the data grid, either or, whatever you prefer, and talk about the second tier of favorites here if we're going to try and get maybe a little contrarian. That next tier of more than a 4-point favorite, but less than a touchdown favorite. The Colts, 6.5. Getting closer to 7 at some spots as we record on Tuesday. They're hosting the Raiders. The Rams have been bet out to a 5.5-point favorite against the 49ers. And the Philadelphia Eagles, 4.5-point favorite against the Broncos. Jason, I'll tell you right now, I think the Rams would actually be the one of the 3 that I'd like to use here if I'm going to. But the reason I'm hesitant to say that is because there's some difficult weeks later in the season where I think the Rams are a team I'm going to want. And the other side of this too is, the Raiders and those offensive line injuries make them really tough. And I think that's just a giant coaching mismatch with Shane Steichen against Pete Carroll. Some of the late game timing, clock management, decision-making from Pete Carroll looks really rough first couple of weeks. So I know it's definitely not the Eagles in this tier for me. I'm curious to get your opinion on that because I think the Eagles have been winning some of these games with smoke and mirrors and special teams variance. And I don't know if Bo Nix is back or not, but I at least know that defense is very live to shut down the Eagles this week if the Eagles keep trotting out what they've trotted out for 3/4 of these games this season.
Yeah, I'm going to – so when we talk about this tier, I think you identified – I think there are 3 that are in play. I would say Philadelphia's out of play. A, I don't want to play against Denver. B, that's accounted for with the relative risk of the win odds. They're at 64% rather than 70, right?
Right.
At home. And they have lots of future value spots. There's several better spots to have Philadelphia. So I'm not even considering Philadelphia in this spot. Same with the Chiefs. I know the Chiefs look really good against a beat-up Ravens team, but there are better spots than on the road in the heat of Florida at Jacksonville in week 5.
They will Rashee Rice for 2 more weeks.
Yeah, you'll catch you may catch an even better Chiefs version against an even a better schedule in the second half of the season. So those 2 I'm kind of crossing a line, and then when you get below that, I think it gets riskier. That Minnesota one has some offensive line injuries. Like, I actually think that line could have been higher, but I do think the injuries are impacting it. Minnesota has a travel edge being over there in London from staying from Dublin and Cleveland coming over. But you also have a team with offensive line injuries going against the Browns unit that, as we know, can wreck a game and keep them in a game, even though I think the quarterback situation in the Browns offense could be ugly. So, I mean, you can absolutely envision a scenario where the Browns muck this game up and win an ugly one, right?
Yep.
Where Carson Wentz makes enough mistakes. So I'm probably just not ready to take that risk in all but like the largest pools as a true contrarian play. So going back to your talk about Indianapolis, yeah, Vegas strikes me as one of those teams that is more your traditional, quote, below average team that can pull a survivor upset.
I agree.
So I am a little worried there because they are capable of scoring points, I think, in the right situation. Obviously they got the injury and on the offensive line, and so we don't know how they go. But they do have the receivers to expose and make big plays, I think.
Yeah.
So that one concerns me. The Colts have some future value. They could be super popular when they play the Titans again in week 8, like really popular, like way more than now. So, I mean, this is I think a decent spot for the Colts. It's not a slam dunk spot. I think it's one where you're at least considering them, but you're considering, do I want to be on them or want to be off of them because of their popularity? I think it's debatable because their future value is low enough that I think it's a reasonable spot for them. So and then the Rams could be emerging. I'm seeing it now at 6.5 in our data grid. That just changed in the last. So I think the injury report out of San Francisco, a short week, all that's going into that. If this number closes at around 6.5, just under a touchdown, I think the Rams could be the sneaky play on this board before half the people have checked in and made their picks for this week.
I'm going to check on the injury news for the Niners to see if there's anything that in particular moved this to 6.5. But like that's what I was going to ask you. So you're agreed with me that of this tier, it's certainly the Rams, but obviously they play on Thursday. So hopefully everybody sees this before kickoff on Thursday if they're going to use some of them. My question to you is, do you like them better from a game theory perspective than any of the biggest favorites of the week that we talked about?
That's an interesting question, right? It depends on maybe what you have available and where this line closes by kickoff. Like, how close are they?
Scenarios. Let's do 2 scenarios. Yeah. One scenario, you have the Cardinals left. One, you do not have the Cardinals left.
Yeah. So I think it's as much for me as how big is the pool and what are my options if I use Detroit versus don't use them, right? If I have them available. Because if I can close that gap, I mean, the Rams right now aren't that far behind the Cardinals in win odds, right? This thing's rising and it's kind of an unexpected spot, but sometimes these unexpected spots are where you make A in Survivor because the popularity doesn't shoot up. I'm looking at the rest of their schedule. They're going to be super popular in week 9. That's probably a case where they still may be a good pick when I have entries, but I'm willing to use some on the Rams. So I'm not all in on the Rams in week 9, if that makes sense. Like, I'm willing to have some available for that, but I also don't know that I want all my portfolio available for that. So I'm willing to I think, diversify with the Rams this week over Arizona in some cases. Like, okay, let's run a scenario. Small pool, right? Small pool. People are getting tight. Let's say there's less than 50 entries left in the game. And maybe those that haven't used Arizona want to use them. I think the Rams are a great play in that kind of pool in the short term, even if they hold at 6.5, if their win odds are like 74%, 73, 74%. I think they're a great play to try to get in and out on Thursday night and then see what happens on Sunday in that kind of pool, because you're giving yourself the same shot as that Detroit logic. I've got 2 popular picks that could make up over half the pool combined. In Arizona, Indianapolis, there's like a 40% chance at least one of them loses. Let me take my shot here, right? That could be the way you think about it, even in a small pool, where you're willing to forego that week 9 spot to be off the popular team then and take the shot now. So I do think the Rams are in play.
The Tuesday early evening 49ers injury news, East Coast time. For a second straight day, Brock Purdy and wide receivers Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings will not practice. Now, it's a short week. That doesn't surprise me. This is a situation where sometimes guys don't practice Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and still play on Thursday. We'll see about that. But the 49ers backup quarterback, Mac Jones, is still banged up with a knee issue. Their third string quarterback is out still, Curtis Rourke. So the only other, literally, as we record here on Tuesday, the only healthy quarterback on the 49ers roster is their practice squad quarterback, Adrian Martinez from Kansas State. So that's Nebraska. It.
Both Nebraska and Kansas State. Yeah. So, well, that's why the line's moving. And so check in on that news. But it's not good for San Francisco. So this is one of those unexpected spots that pop up. If you remember last year, I feel like this is the story every year with the Niners lately, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I wish I could credit the person who said this. I saw a tweet, and it was like, Juwan Jennings being unable to go into the medical tent because Ricky Pearsall was already in the medical tent. It's peak 49ers football. And so this team just is snake bit. I mean, But if you remember last year, we had this same thing pop up. They went to Green Bay, right? It was a
Mhm.
game, I think, in week 6 or 7. You would have had the local headlines would have been like under a field goal, right? Two pretty even teams. But then we find out Purdy's out. We got some other injuries. Green Bay shoots up to like a -6 and rolls by 30 and had like 5% ownership in survivor pools. I played them. And that was like the similar spot where not everybody in the Publix is tuned into that. And so you're getting
Right.
some popularity value by playing those spots when teams are really impacted and not as good as their full squad. And so there's a decent chance 49ers are really depleted on offense on Thursday night.
The other thing too is Christian McCaffrey has been not his old self this year, even though he's been healthy. The PFF grades on the blocking of the Niners offensive line have been like top 6, top 5 in the league, but McCaffrey's been very inefficient as a runner. I'm not sure he's got it anymore in terms of being an explosive between the tackles or a zone runner. He's still effective as like a slot receiver or a guy catching the ball out of the backfield, but even their healthy running back isn't what he used to be. So
just for the record, that's Stephen Andress calling you out, Christian, not Jason Lisk.
You're the goat. Like, you are the LT of this era, CMC. I love you. You're amazing.
Don't stick it in my eye hole on Thursday night by having a 200-yard game.
Oh man, he's getting treatment. You don't have to worry about
That's
CMC watching this video. It's all good. Excellent. That's if that happens, then anyway, let's move on. I don't think there's any other contrarian considerations for me this week. I thought a little bit about the Seahawks as a 3.5-point favorite against the Bucks, as maybe one of those multi-entry pools where you might put one on them because the Bucks are so banged up. And I think the Seahawks are rising very quickly in my power rankings, to be honest with you. That was the only one in this range that I thought about.
Yeah, I'll give you some quick thoughts on the Seahawks because I do think they're an interesting one, right? I think that line's still at 3.5. Our models are a little higher, but their market odds are probably around 63%. They are a contrarian shot because they're at low ownership. They were heavily used. When we took them in week 3, we said they have low future value. But as things have turned out, because the Titans have continued to tank, and because their ownership is now limited, and because they look good again with a road win on Thursday night, they have shot up where they now have some spots, right?
Yeah.
Where, I think they're usable this week, but I probably wouldn't want to burn a lot of them. Like you said, playing a lot, I'm willing to have like 5% on them of my entries, maybe something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to use them on entries that have used Buffalo or Denver, and I'll tell you why. I think they're that third option in week 10 in a tough week. In a tough week 10, do we have it up here? I'll pull it up because I think this is one. Look at our numbers. 74% Denver, 72% Buffalo, nobody else above 67%. That is a tough week compared to this week, right? And so that Seattle spot back home against Arizona could very well be in play as the type of pick you need in a very tough week. And so they're in play there. They're also probably going to be one of the biggest favorites in week 17 as we sit here right now when they travel to Carolina. If they're still as good as they are now, that's a tough week. So I think they don't have some obvious spots, but they have some value spots where they could be quite important as we're getting into the season to bail you out of some even worse picks. And so I do like Seattle this week as a contrarian play, but I'm also willing to save them on some of those entries because I think they have sneaky value later.
All right, Jason, let's wrap things up with our top 3 picks for NFL survivor pools in week number 5. We are approaching this from just a basic survivor pool standpoint, 1 pick per week, no extra picks, no rebuys, no holiday weeks like Circus Survivor, just a straight up NFL survivor pool. That's how we do our top 3 on this video each week. So take it away, my friend. Top 3.
Yeah, so I'm going to go across all pool types here.
All right, okay.
I have a clear top 2, right? And I think it differs by how big my pool is. My top 1 is probably Detroit, but that's only if I'm in a smaller to mid-sized pool. As I get larger, as I need multi-picks late in the year, I might save them more. But I think Detroit's the slam pick from a value standpoint. Even though they have high future value, this is one of those spots you save teams for. to have like a massive EV edge on the field. The Rams are the other one because of what we talked about. As this injury report comes in, I think they've developed into a play we did not see 2 weeks ago. And it presents you that opportunity. And because we have 2 concentrated picks, I like that as the clear top 2 to me. Now, number 3, this is where it gets hard. Because I think I want exposure to, I don't want to be completely off Arizona and Indy. Which one do I want to be less weight on? My portfolio has done a good job of saving future value. I probably want Indy over Arizona. I'm willing to fade the more popular team if I feel like I've done a good job of mostly saving future value through the first 4 weeks. That's why you save future value, so you can take these kind of shots. And so I'm probably putting Indy ahead of Arizona on popularity. And because I may not want to be as concentrated on Indy in week 8, so I'm willing to use them a little bit now in this matchup.
I love it. You know, we've had some disagreements with our top 3 in the past few weeks. We are completely aligned this time, my friend. And just a reminder to everybody, when I give my top 3 at the end of these videos, I immediately cross out the team that's projected to be the most popular right now. That is the Arizona Cardinals as we record on Tuesday afternoon. So I'm just crossing them off my top 3 pick considerations. Just for me, my personal choice. I just don't want to have the most popular team in my entries most every week in Survivor until we get closer to the end game. So it's the same top 2 for me, Jason. It's the Detroit Lions and the LA Rams for sure. And then a pretty big gap, like you said. And then I don't want to use the Colts because of the potential upside of the Vegas offense if they figure it out. Also because the Colts have a spot coming up here against the Titans, and I think the Titans are a dead team. So I want that. I want to at least see if they're going to be mega popular and at least have that option with the Colts, considering I have 2 other really good options this week. So I think for me, the number 3 team is probably the Seattle Seahawks against a still very injured Tampa Bay Buccaneers squad. But you made great points about the 2 spots and their future value where it would be nice to have them down the road. So again, it is a big gap between those top 2 of the Lions and the Rams down to number 3 Seattle for me. All right, everybody. Jason, any final thoughts here before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I don't know what it means if we're in agreement. I hope that doesn't mean bad things for us. Let's disagree real quick. What can we disagree on? We got to disagree on something.
Okay, I'll give you this. Buffalo actually is not on upset alert.
Okay. Those games have very little home field advantage in the AFC East. I think the odds are too high because of that. I like getting those road dogs in the Patriots, and Drake May's better than Josh Allen at something.
The fact that you are superstitious likes me even more. I have no idea if what you actually said is true and if you actually believe it, but let's just leave it that way. Sometimes cliffhangers are good. All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, do us a small favor. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Trying to break our record from last week of more than 500 likes. If you need that free trial, it's down in the description. Also, a link to the Pool Genius Discord if you want to ask the Pool Genius staff questions throughout the week. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a blast doing these videos. Let's keep it up. Let's see how many people survive this week or if this is finally the carnage week in week number 5. For Jason Lisk, I'm Steven Andress. Best of luck in your Survivor pools for week 5.